Every Christmas, there was one empty chair no one ever noticed. Mine. For 23 years, my own parents celebrated without me, as if I had never been part of the family. But the Christmas they arrived at the biggest house in town, everything changed, and one secret turned their perfect holiday into complete silence. People like to believe Christmas is the season of love. I used to believe that too. As a kid, I counted down the days with the kind of excitement only children understand. I'd circle December 25th on every calendar I could find. I'd make paper snowflakes, decorate my bedroom window, and imagine waking up to laughter, cinnamon rolls, and presents with my name written in my mother's careful handwriting. Instead, I learned what it felt like to be forgotten, not ignored, not punished. Forgotten. There's a difference. My name is Ethan Carter, and if someone had asked my parents how many children they had, they would have answered, 2. The strange part? There were actually 3 of us. My older sister, Madison, was the golden child. My younger brother, Tyler, was the miracle baby. I was. Somewhere in between, or maybe outside the picture altogether. The first Christmas I remember clearly, I was 6 years old. I woke before sunrise, threw on my slippers, and raced downstairs. The living room looked magical. Lights sparkled across the tree. Wrapped presents covered the floor. The smell of hot chocolate drifted from the kitchen. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. Mom handed Madison a beautifully wrapped box. Daddy picked this one himself. Dad laughed as Tyler opened an expensive remote control truck. That's my boy. I waited. Surely mine was next. The pile grew smaller. The wrapping paper covered the carpet. Everyone laughed. Nobody looked at me. Finally, my grandmother frowned. Linda, isn't Ethan missing something? Mom looked around the room as if she had genuinely forgotten I existed. Oh. She disappeared upstairs. 10 minutes later, she returned holding a dusty toy that still had a clearance sticker on it. I knew we had something. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because 6-year-olds don't know they're supposed to cry. That became our family tradition. Every Christmas, I received whatever someone remembered at the last second. A sweater 2 sizes too big. A book meant for someone half my age. A pair of socks already missing one. Sometimes nothing at all. The excuses never changed. We've just been so busy. You know we're terrible at shopping. We'll make it up to you. They never did. At school, teachers always asked us to write essays about our favorite Christmas memories. My classmates wrote about vacations, family games, matching pajamas, snowball fights. I invented stories. I described Christmases I wished had happened instead of the ones I actually lived. No one ever knew, not even my best friend Lucas. Because admitting, your parents forget you, every single year feels impossible. People assume you're exaggerating. Surely no parents would do that. I used to defend them. They're just stressed. They don't mean it. They love me. I repeated those words so often they almost sounded true. Almost. Everything became clearer when I turned 14. Dad announced we were taking professional family Christmas photos. Mom spent weeks planning outfits. She made appointments with a stylist. She bought matching scarves. She hired the most expensive photographer in town. The morning of the shoot, I came downstairs wearing the sweater she'd laid on my bed. Everyone froze. Dad frowned. What are you doing? You said family pictures start at 10. Mom looked confused. No, sweetheart. Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. This session is just for your father, Madison, and Tyler. I laughed. I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. But I'm family. Silence. Then Dad sighed. The package only includes 4 people. I stared at him. There are 5 people. He looked irritated. We already paid the deposit. Madison avoided my eyes. Tyler kept playing with his phone. Mom touched my shoulder. You understand, don't you? No, I didn't. I watched their car disappear down the driveway while I stood alone on the porch wearing clothes I'd never wear anywhere else. That afternoon, they framed the picture. It hung over the fireplace for 10 years. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering, a perfect family of 4. Guests often looked around the room. "Didn't you have another child?" Mom always smiled awkwardly. "Oh, Ethan was busy that day." Busy. I was upstairs, crying. By 16, I stopped expecting invitations. I spent Christmas volunteering at a local soup kitchen. The first year, I told everyone I wanted to help the community. The truth? Watching strangers care about one another hurt less than watching my own family pretend I didn't exist. That's where I met Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. She was nearly 80. She volunteered every Christmas without fail. She noticed things other people missed, like the fact I always stayed after everyone else left, like the way I smiled without my eyes. One evening she asked, "Do your parents know where you spend Christmas?" "They think I'm with friends." "And are you?" I looked around the empty kitchen. "I guess I am now." She smiled sadly. "You deserve better than people who only remember you when it's convenient." No one had ever said that to me before. Those words stayed with me. Years passed. High school ended. Madison left for an expensive private university that my parents proudly funded. Tyler received a brand new pickup truck for graduation when I graduated. Dad shook my hand. Mom hugged me. They handed me a card with $20 inside. "We know you'll figure life out." That was it. No celebration, no dinner, no photos, just $20. I packed a duffel bag the following week. Mom hugged me at the door. "Don't be a stranger." I almost laughed. How could I become a stranger to people who never noticed I was there? Life wasn't kind after that. It was harder. Much harder. I worked construction during the day, delivered pizzas at night, studied business online after midnight. Some weeks I slept 4 hours a night. I rented tiny apartments with leaky ceilings, drove cars that barely started, skipped meals to pay tuition. Meanwhile, social media showed my family's perfect Christmas traditions continuing every year. Matching pajamas, luxury vacations, cozy fires, family portraits, always 4 people. Never me. Eventually, I stopped looking. Mrs. Brooks remained the one constant in my life. She celebrated every Christmas with me. We exchanged inexpensive gifts, cooked dinner together, watched old holiday movies. She never forgot my birthday. Never forgot to ask how work was going. Never forgot my favorite pie. She remembered everything. One snowy December evening, she looked across the table and smiled. "You know what the funny thing about families is?" "What?" "The ones we're born into aren't always the ones who deserve us." That sentence changed something inside me. I stopped chasing people who had spent decades running away. Instead, I chased opportunities. One investment became 2. A small renovation project became a property business. One rental house turned into 5. Then 10. Years of sacrifice slowly became years of success. But I told almost no one. Not because I wanted revenge, because peace grows best in silence. My parents never asked what I did for a living, not once. Every Christmas they mailed the same generic card. "Merry Christmas from all of us," signed by 4 people. Sometimes they even forgot to write my name on the envelope. I kept every card, not out of love, as reminders. Reminders of who they had chosen to be. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, my realtor called. I found it. The one? The old Whitmore estate. I nearly dropped my coffee. Everyone knew the Whitmore estate. It sat on the highest hill overlooking the entire town. 40 acres, private lake, massive stone mansion. People called it the Crown of Ashford. It had belonged to one of the wealthiest families in the state. Most assumed only celebrities or billionaires could afford it. I drove there that afternoon. The gates opened slowly. The driveway stretched farther than some neighborhoods. When I stepped inside, sunlight poured through towering windows, for the first time in my life. I wasn't imagining what home could feel like. I was standing inside it. I bought the estate 3 weeks later, quietly. No interviews, no newspaper announcements, no celebration. I simply moved in. I thought no one would notice. I was wrong, because 3 days before Christmas, a local newspaper published a front-page article. Local entrepreneur purchases historic Whitmore estate. My phone rang less than an hour later. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in almost 11 months. Mom. For a long moment, I simply stared at the screen. Then it rang again, and again. By evening, there were 12 missed calls, one voicemail, then another, then a text message that made my stomach tighten. Ethan, we need to talk. It's about Christmas. I hadn't heard those words from my parents in over 20 years. But something told me this time. They finally remembered exactly who I was. Just not for the reason I had always hoped. I stared at my mother's text for nearly an hour before I answered. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I already knew exactly why she was calling. People don't suddenly remember someone they've ignored for decades. They remember what that person has. I finally replied with 3 simple words. She called before I could even put my phone down. Her voice sounded warmer than I remembered. Ethan, honey. I was starting to worry. Worry? She hadn't worried when I spent Christmases alone. She hadn't worried when I moved into a 1-room apartment with broken heating. She hadn't worried when I worked 3 jobs. But now she was worried because I owned the largest house in town. I've been busy. I know, sweetheart. We all have. Life just gets away from us. I smiled to myself. Life doesn't just get away. People make choices. So, I saw the newspaper. I'm sure you did. We're so proud of you. Those 4 words should have meant everything. Instead, they felt completely empty, because they came 20 years too late. She hesitated. We were thinking. Here it comes. Maybe this year we could all spend Christmas together. I leaned back in my chair. The silence between us stretched long enough to make her uncomfortable. Ethan? Yes? You still there? I'm trying to remember. Remember what? The last Christmas you invited me. Silence. Real silence. Not the kind people choose. The kind that appears when there's no good answer. Well, I'll help. You don't have to. No, I do. I stood and walked toward the massive window overlooking the snow-covered lake. The last Christmas invitation I received was, actually, I don't think there ever was one. Ethan. I remember showing up because I lived in the same house. You're making this sound worse than it was. I laughed. That surprised even me. It was exactly what it was. Her voice became smaller. People change. I hope so. Then, you'll come? I didn't say that. Another long pause. Finally, she asked the question she'd really wanted to ask. Is the newspaper right? What part? The house. Yes. It's really yours? Yes. The whole estate? Yes. Oh, there it was. Wonder. Not at me, at the mansion. She changed the subject almost instantly. You know, your father has always loved historic homes. Of course he had, especially expensive ones. I'll think about Christmas. She sounded relieved. Wonderful, we'll tell everyone. I didn't say yes. We'll just assume you will. No. What? I said I'll think about it. Then I ended the call. The next morning my phone exploded. Madison, Tyler, aunts, uncles, cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. Every conversation sounded strangely similar. Ethan, long time. We should catch up. We miss you. Family is everything. Funny. Apparently, family became everything the moment the newspaper printed the value of my house. By Friday evening, my mailbox contained 6 Christmas cards. Every single one mentioned how important family traditions were. One even included a handwritten note. Let's make up for lost time. Lost time, as though it had wandered away on its own, as though no one had chosen to leave me behind. Mrs. Brooks noticed my mood immediately. She arrived carrying her usual apple pie. You've got that look. What look? The one that says you're trying to forgive people who haven't apologized. I smiled. You know me too well. She looked around my enormous kitchen. It still amazes me. What does? You built all this without becoming bitter. I came close. But you didn't. I had help. She squeezed my hand. No. She smiled gently. You chose who you became. Those words settled deep inside me. Success hadn't healed every wound. But it had proven one thing. My family's opinion had never defined my worth. Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at my front gate. The security monitor lit up. I nearly dropped my coffee. My parents stood outside, along with Madison Tyler, their spouses. 3 children, even my Aunt Susan. 9 people. No one had called. No one had been invited. The guard radioed the house. Sir? I sighed. Open the gate. As they drove slowly toward the mansion, I watched them through the second-floor balcony. Every single head turned. Their mouths literally hung open. Dad stepped out first. He stared up at the stone columns. Good Lord, Mom whispered. It's even bigger in person. Not one person said, I'm happy to see you. Their eyes never left the house. When I opened the front door, everyone suddenly remembered I existed. Ethan, hug your mother. Look at you. Dad wrapped one arm around me like we had always been close. He smelled exactly the same. Wood aftershave, coffee, and memories I wished I didn't have. Madison walked inside without asking. Oh my gosh. Tyler whistled. Dude. Their children sprinted through the foyer. Can we see upstairs? Mom laughed. They're just excited. No one asked permission. No one even waited for me to answer. Within minutes, they were wandering through every room, opening doors, taking pictures, looking inside closets. It didn't feel like a family visit. It felt like strangers touring a museum. Then I overheard something. Aunt Susan whispered, Imagine how much this place is worth. Dad answered quietly. At least 6 million. I wasn't supposed to hear, but I did. And suddenly every missing Christmas made perfect sense. They weren't here because they loved me. They were calculating. Dinner was awkward, mostly because everyone acted like we'd shared holidays our entire lives. Mom kept saying, remember when? Except every story involved Madison or Tyler. I wasn't mentioned once. Finally, Tyler laughed. You barely talked as a kid. I looked at him. I talked. What? No one listened. The table fell silent. Dad cleared his throat. So, here it comes. This place has plenty of bedrooms. 21? His eyebrows lifted. 21? Yes. Seems awfully lonely. I've never been happier. Mom reached across the table. We've been thinking. Of course they had. What if? She smiled. We all started spending Christmas here every year. No one breathed. Every face turned toward me, waiting, expecting, assuming. I set down my fork. I already have Christmas plans. Confusion spread instantly. Dad frowned. With who? My family. Mom blinked. We're your family. I met her eyes. Are you? Silence. The kind that hurts. Madison spoke first. Ethan, don't do this. I'm not. You know what he means. I actually don't. Dad sighed dramatically. People make mistakes. For 23 Christmases, You're keeping score? No. I smiled. I kept memories. The conversation ended shortly afterward. They left looking disappointed, not heartbroken, disappointed, like customers discovering something wasn't for sale. As their cars disappeared down the driveway, Mrs. Brooks stepped onto the porch carrying fresh cookies. I saw everything. You always do. Were they here for you? I looked toward the empty gate. No. They were here for the house. She nodded. I know. How? Because people who love you look into your eyes. She glanced toward the driveway. Your family never looked past your front door. Christmas Eve arrived. Snow covered the estate. The fireplaces glowed. Music filled every hallway. For the first time in my life, I decorated a home exactly the way I'd imagined as a child. No empty chair, no forgotten presents, no pretending. At 6 o'clock, guests began arriving. Not relatives, friends, former co-workers, neighbors, the volunteers from the soup kitchen, families who had nowhere else to go. Every person walked through my door because they wanted my company, not my address. Mrs. Brooks stood beside me welcoming everyone. Then, at exactly 7:12. The doorbell rang again. I frowned. Everyone I invited had already arrived. I opened the front door. My entire family stood outside, all of them, holding wrapped gifts, smiling for the first time in years. Mom stepped forward. We thought we'd surprise you. Behind her. 3 moving trucks slowly pulled into my driveway. My smile disappeared. Dad looked strangely confident. We figured. He reached into his pocket. Since this place is so big. He held up a folded piece of paper. It's finally time the whole family lived together again. I stared at the document in his hand, then at the moving trucks, then back at my parents. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't a Christmas surprise. It was the beginning of something much bigger. And much darker. Dad held the folded document in one hand, while 3 moving trucks idled behind him, their engines rumbling through the snowy evening. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The laughter from inside my house drifted through the open doorway. Christmas music played softly in the background while children decorated cookies in the dining room. My family stood outside. My real family was inside. Dad smiled as though this were the most natural thing in the world. Surprise. I looked from the trucks back to him. What exactly is this? Mom stepped forward. We thought it would be wonderful if we all lived together again. I blinked. You thought that? Madison nodded. Look how big this place is. You have more rooms than you'll ever use. Tyler laughed. You won't even notice we're here. I stared at every face in front of me. Not one of them looked embarrassed. Not one of them asked. They had already decided. Dad unfolded the paper. I even drew up a plan. He proudly handed it to me. It was a floor plan of my own house. Every bedroom had someone's name written on it. Madison, her husband, their kids, Tyler, his wife, my parents, even Aunt Susan. The only room without a name was mine. I looked up slowly. You assigned everyone a bedroom. Dad smiled. See? We knew you'd appreciate us organizing everything. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep? He pointed toward a small room over the garage. That little apartment should be perfect for one person. For one long moment, I couldn't even process what I'd heard. They had walked into my life for the first time in years, and somehow managed to forget me in my own house. Again. The irony was almost unbelievable. Mrs. Brooks quietly stepped onto the porch behind me. She looked at the paper, then at my face. Without saying a word, she understood everything. Dad cleared his throat. So, should we have the movers start unloading? I folded the paper neatly. Then I handed it back. No. His smile faded. What do you mean, no? I mean exactly that. Mom forced a laugh. Oh, Ethan, don't tease us. I'm not teasing anyone. Tyler crossed his arms. Come on, man. No. Dad's expression hardened. We're family. You remembered that pretty quickly. His face turned red. What is that supposed to mean? I looked each of them in the eye. It means that for 23 Christmases, I wasn't family. Nobody answered. You forgot my presence. Silence. You forgot to invite me. Silence. You took family pictures without me. Madison looked down. You signed Christmas cards without my name. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I was just so busy. No. I shook my head. You made time for everyone else. The driveway became completely quiet. Even the movers had stopped watching. I continued. When I graduated, Madison got a vacation. She looked away. Tyler got a truck. He stared at the ground. I got $20. Nobody argued, because nobody could. You weren't poor. I looked directly at Dad. You weren't struggling. I turned toward Mom. You simply decided I mattered less. Mom finally broke down crying. I never wanted you to feel that way. I answered softly. But I did. Those 4 words carried 23 years of pain. Dad suddenly stepped closer. So that's it? I waited. You're going to punish us forever? I smiled sadly. You think this is punishment? What else would you call it? I call it consequences. His jaw tightened. We're your parents. Yes. You owe us respect. I gave you respect. For years, you wanted obedience. He took another step. I sacrificed everything for you. That sentence almost made me laugh. What exactly did you sacrifice? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because there wasn't an answer. From inside the house came laughter. One of the neighborhood children had just won a Christmas game. Mrs. Brooks smiled. Sounds like everyone's having fun. Mom looked through the doorway. Who's here? My Christmas guests. She frowned. Friends? And family. She looked confused. I don't understand. You will. I stepped aside. Everyone inside looked toward the front door, the volunteers from the soup kitchen, my old construction foreman, neighbors, a young widow and her 2 daughters, an elderly couple with no children, people from every chapter of my life. They all smiled when they saw me. One little girl ran over. Ethan! She hugged my leg. We're waiting for you to cut the cake. I picked her up. I'll be right there. She kissed my cheek before running back inside. My mother watched all of it, quietly. Then she whispered, They love you. I nodded. Yes. Who are they? They're the people who remembered me. Nobody spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Mrs. Brooks stepped forward. She looked directly at my parents. You know? Her voice was calm. I met Ethan when he was 16. Mom slowly looked at her. He spent every Christmas serving meals to strangers. Tears rolled down Mom's cheeks. Mrs. Brooks continued. Do you know what he told everyone? Silence. He said his parents thought he was spending Christmas with friends. Mom covered her mouth. But he wasn't. Mrs. Brooks' eyes filled with tears. He just didn't want anyone to know he'd been forgotten. No one moved. Dad couldn't even look at me. I watched this young man spend years wondering what was wrong with him. She pointed gently toward me. The answer was. She looked back at my parents. Nothing. It was never him. It was you. Those words hit harder than any argument ever could. Dad sat down on the porch step. For the first time in my life, he looked small. Very small. After several minutes, he finally spoke. I honestly didn't realize. I believed him, not because he was innocent, because neglect had become so normal to him that he had stopped seeing it. Mom whispered, "We kept telling ourselves we'd make it up to you next year." There was always another Christmas, another birthday, another chance. She cried harder, until there wasn't. I looked at both of them. I spent my childhood believing I wasn't worth remembering. Mom collapsed into tears. "I'm so sorry." For the first time. It didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded broken, real. Dad slowly stood. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good." He nodded. "I haven't earned it." He looked toward the moving trucks, then at the drivers. "I'm sorry." He reached into his wallet, paid them, and sent them away. The trucks pulled out of the driveway one by one. Nobody argued. Nobody complained. The fantasy was over. Before leaving, Mom reached into her purse. She handed me an old envelope. "I found this last week." Inside was a stack of letters. Every Christmas card I had made for them as a child. Every handmade ornament. Every drawing. Every little note saying, "I love you." They had never thrown them away. Mom whispered, "I couldn't." I looked through them slowly. One picture showed 5 stick figures holding hands. Our family, including me. I had drawn it when I was 7. On the back was one sentence written in crooked handwriting. "I hope next Christmas we can all be together." I closed my eyes. That little boy deserved so much better. Dad looked at me one final time. "We'll leave now." I nodded. Merry Christmas. It was the first Christmas either of us had ever truly meant those words. They walked back toward their cars, not angry, not defeated, just painfully aware of everything they had lost. When I walked back inside, everyone cheered. Mrs. Brooks hugged me. "You okay?" I smiled. "I think." I looked around the room. Children laughing, friends talking, the smell of cinnamon and fresh cookies, the warmth I'd searched for my entire life. "I'm finally home." She squeezed my hand. "You always were." 6 months later, I received an invitation, a family barbecue, hosted by my parents. At the bottom was one handwritten sentence: "There will always be a seat for you." I went, not because the past disappeared, it never would, but because forgiveness doesn't erase history. It simply refuses to let history control the future. Things weren't magically perfect. Trust took time. Years, actually. Some wounds became scars, but scars no longer bleed. Every Christmas after that, my parents came to my house. Not because it was the biggest house in town, because it had become the place where our family finally learned what home really meant. Before dinner, Dad always looked around the table to make sure every chair was filled, especially mine. He never forgot again. Sometimes success doesn't change. The people who overlooked you, it reveals who they truly were. The greatest victory isn't making those people regret losing you. It's building a life so full of love, peace, and genuine relationships that being forgotten no longer defines your future. The family you're born into gives you your beginning, but the family you choose and the people who choose you can give you the ending you've always deserved.